What God was showing me is the fact that those pieces aren't a part of you. That piece doesn't matter. This piece to the puzzle no longer exists, because when I'm breaking you, I'm rebuilding you to something new. Breaking actually brings breakthrough. Sometimes God allows our whole world to come crashing down so that we can rebuild our life back on a solid foundation. And that solid foundation is God. I have been broken many of times, and I always seem to start over from ground zero. But it wasn't until I realized that God was the missing piece that my life started to transform. So many times when we break, we want to take those pieces with us. So many times I tried to pick the pieces back up and rebuild them myself. I tried to put the pieces back to the puzzle because I was like, I have to fix me. I have to make me back right. I have to be the one to do it. But what God was showing me is the fact that those pieces aren't a part of you. That piece doesn't matter. This piece to the puzzle no longer exists, because when I'm breaking you, I'm rebuilding you to something new, something that's not familiar to even you. And I used to think that the way that I was who I was. And I thought that the person that I was who I was meant to be. But oftentimes what happens is we become this character that we think is who we are. We become these versions of ourselves to either cope with what we're going through or deal with our problems. But we're never actually dealing with our problems. We're just covering it all up. We're covering the mess with a blanket and a band-aid, and we think that no one can see it. But the person who can see it is actually God. And God knows all of the things and the areas that he needs to fix and rebuild you. Breaking brings breakthrough for a reason. God is never going to give you the things that he has for you when you're the version of the person who he never called you to be in the first place. When you're the person who's still destructive, when you're not the person for the job at the moment, because when you get there, and if you're on the journey to get there, you'll destroy it before you even arrive. I used to ask God so many times for things that I was never ready for. I used to ask him for opportunities, for relationships or people, but I was never ready for those things that I was asking him for. I was not the person who could withstand these things or that could add value or benefit these situations. If anything, I would tear it down the very moment that I got it, because I felt like everything around me was unstable. I felt like everything around me was broken. Everything around me was already crashing and crumbling down. I didn't understand the value of a good thing at one point. I didn't understand the value of becoming a better person in order to receive those very things I'm asking for, so that when I get the thing that I'm asking for, I know how to cater to it. I know how to love it properly. I know how to build it as well as building myself. And I went through life just thinking that I could cover up my mess. I could act like it was never there, and I can push it in a corner and just get it out of my mind, put it off of my memory, and just act like it wasn't there. But the craziest part is there was always a reminder. It was always a thought process. It was always a little chatter in the back of my head, like, you know you're broken, right? You know that you're unfixable, right? You know that you did this thing, so now you feel bad about yourself. You know that these people make you feel less than yourself. You know your friends aren't necessarily bringing out it was just all of this little chatter that I would hear, and it would remind me of who I actually was at the time. It would remind me of how low I felt about myself. There was always a reminder to let me know you've never gotten too far. Even if you try to think that you're reading your Bible and you try to go to church, or you try to, talk about your problems, you didn't get too far. This is still here. I'm still here. And it just reminded me of something I wanted to let go of so bad. I went through different seasons where I was alone, and God really got me by myself to show me everything I hated about me. I would feel so alone. I would feel so detached from the world. I often felt very depressed in these moments because the very things I tried to hide was at the face of myself. It was literally me looking at me for the very first times of my life. And I would sit there and I would just be disgusted with who I was. I would be upset and irritated at the fact that that was my life. I realize now that God took me away from all of the noise, took me away from all of the chatter, all of the friends, all of the people, the relationships, all of the things that I was using to fill a void. And the void could only be filled by God. When I was by myself in these times, I started to look at my life as a whole. And I really started to think, is this the way that I want to live the rest of my life? And the answer was no. And it was a turning point for me, because it was such a pivotal moment of my life to say that I identified there was something wrong with me. I knew that the way I was living my life up until this point was not ideal. I knew that I was trying to guide my own steps, guide my own path, and I thought I knew what was best for me. But God used this moment of isolation and separation to really show me everything about myself that I needed to fix, that I needed to change. And the craziest part is, we try to blind ourselves with all of these things in life, materialistic things. We try to blind ourselves with relationships, friendships. We try to be busy. We try to find ways to occupy our time so we never really have to deal with ourselves. We never really have to sit there long enough to even feel the feeling of what it's like to really be us when we're us by ourselves. Like, to really feel who you are when no one's around, no one's in the room with you. You're completely by yourself. And then you sit there and you think like, who is this person? Or the person that I am is not someone who I'm happy with. I'm not happy with this version of myself. I'm not happy with who I'm showing up as. Like, then you start to think of all the different things that's wrong with you. And you start to think of, how do I fix this immediately? What do I do? And most of the time, our first instinct is to go back to covering it all up, hiding it from the world. But God took me through some really tough seasons in my life where I felt really, really low about me. And the only thing that gave me relief and that gave me peace through my breaking season was the fact that God was always there. And I know sometimes we don't really know, like, if you're just now coming to faith, or you're just now hearing about God, you may not know what I mean by God is always there. But God used a lot of different situations to reveal that he was there for me. Sometimes it was through conversations with random people that would uplift my spirits in a moment when I felt the lowest of my life. And they would always remind me, like, of the very things I needed to hear at the time. I specifically remember there was a situation where a pastor spoke over me at a church, and he told me that your secret battle with depression is over. And he told me how I felt a lack of love. I was trying to fill a void, and I tried to build relationships and friendships and all of these things to fill that lack of love that I had. And that's something I never told anyone. But it reminded me that God really knew all of the very things that I struggled with. And so I say all of this to say, God will show up in many different ways in your life. And whether that's through his word or people, friendships, or situations, you'll know that he's always there, because the very things that you say when no one's around, the very thoughts that you have, the very things that you feel uneasy about, God will reveal those things to you in order for you to allow him to fix it. And God had to break me in order for me to get my breakthrough. And I'm so happy that I experienced those things, and I went through life, and I continued on through life to allow God to reveal that to me. So some of you are trying to give up too soon. You think that there's no hope and there's no help coming, but the help is already there. God is already there. He just needs you to rely on him and stop trying to fix things by yourself. So allow the breaking to bring your breakthrough, and you're not broken for good. God is going to allow the breaking to rebuild you. And I hope this video helped you.